Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The concept of deviation and the concept of parallelism evoke the interest of the reader in any text or writing. Literature, as we know, is distinguished by its character, that is, it makes information sound as if it has never been heard in this way or in this style before. Had the writers also been choosing the straightforward, simple and informative style of speech as adopted in news reporting or as adopted in journalism, the ideas, themes and messages which can be conveyed to the reader through different means which are more implicit would never have been possible. So it is through the use of deviation and such patterns like schemes and tropes that any feature of a text is foregrounded, made prominent, and becomes worth a notice for the reader, as well as it is the distinctive mark of literary writing that it deviates from the norms. It establishes its own rules, which is in fact considered deviation or rule breaking. In our study of the concept of foregrounding, we understand the concept of parallelism as a concept which is used to create rules and balance within the text. And on the other hand is the idea of deviation, which is rule breaking or creating a disorder which makes the reader feel confused or baffled as if he has never experienced these ideas or thoughts before. But the charm of literary writing lies in the fact that things cannot be explained straightforwardly. Either it would be the form or the style that will be confusing for the reader, baffling for the reader to interpret and understand, or it would be the meanings or the metaphors or the puns which would create trouble or complication for the reader for the sake of understanding. We see that schemes and tropes can be, in simple terms, referred to as literary devices, rhetorical devices or stylistic devices. Why do we divide these into two types? As some devices are referred to as schemes and the other are referred to as tropes. Schemes are, as the very name suggests, they create a scheme, an order and balance, whereas tropes disrupt the order, they disturb the form, they complicate the meaning. So schemes operate at the level of sound and words, whereas tropes operate at the level of meaning and understanding. So that is why the devices of literature that are referred to as either literary devices, rhetorical devices, figures of speech or stylistic devices as well, they are divided into two groups on the basis of the function that they perform. If one device that is referred to as a scheme operates at the level of sound and word, the other, referred to as tropes, operates at the level of meaning and message. For your understanding and clarity about what is the relationship of schemes and tropes with foregrounding and parallelism and deviation also, look at this slide that shows that parallelism and deviation both come under the broader heading of foregrounding. Foregrounding, which is the major theory within the subject and domain of stylistics, which highlights the fact how literary language is distinguished from ordinary language. And in order to search for the reasons of the differences of the literary language from the ordinary language, we study what are the methods employed by the writers that a literary writing differs from an ordinary language. And those studies of the style reveal to us that writers use symmetry of form, balance in form, devices like that of repetition of sounds and words to create parallel structures within the text, so that the rhythm, the balance, the rhyme, the meter and the reiteration of the ideas makes any idea or theme significant and prominent through repetition. And on the other hand lies the concept of deviation, which a writer makes use of in order to disrupt or break the conventions or the existing patterns of writing. So when a reader comes across a deviation, that is disruption or the change in meaning and order, he is receiving a sort of a shock. And to satisfy that feeling of shock or amazement, he works upon the thought or idea which he finds out of place, incongruous or unbelievable. So with this exercise on part of the reader, the writer's purpose is fulfilled, because he wishes to prolong the process of reading, the process of deriving aesthetic sense from a literary piece or a piece of art. Now observe that parallelism is where we make use of certain schemes in writing. Now what schemes are? Schemes is a general or more broader term to refer to those devices which are concerned with the formation of a text, shape of a text, pattern of a text, or the appearance and style of a text. And these schemes can further be delineated with the help of certain devices, which are devices or figures of repetition. As in the last lecture, we discussed the figures of repetition with respect to sound as well as word. So figures of repetition like alliteration, that is the example of the figures of the repetition of sound, and also anaphora, that is the example of the figures of repetition of words. So in foregrounding, writer may stick to one way or the other. One way is to foreground something through parallelism, and the other way is to foreground something in writing through deviation. When a writer chooses to foreground something with the help of parallelism, he makes use of schemes. And schemes include multiple and numerous devices which change the form or shape of a writing, either adding symmetry, repetition, order, balance, rhythm, and rhyme to it for the sake of memorability, for the sake of emphasis, and also for the sake of importance or interpretation. So figures which involve repetition come under broader heading of schemes, because they are concerned with the repetition, which is the shape or form of a text. There is not much change in the meaning, there is not much disturbance in the meaning, whereas the other method that is available to the literary artist is that of creating something more, or making something more prominent through foregrounding, is through deviation, as deviation can be done with the help of tropes. So such devices which change meaning or which turn the meaning are referred to as tropes. And among tropes we can include figures or devices which involve the semantic irregularity. Now semantic irregularity, as the word semantic is related to meaning. Semantics is the study of meaning. So when a writer chooses such devices which create semantic irregularity or which disrupt the meaning, change the meaning, or turn the meaning to some other domain or area, there we refer to such devices as figures involving semantic irregularities or the tropes. For example, pun changes the meaning. Similarly, metaphor changes the meaning, transfers meaning from one domain to another. So observe that alliteration and anaphora are schemes because they do not change the meaning, but they change the shape or form, and shape and form is given more balance, symmetry, order through repetition of sound and word, whereas deviation depends upon changing meaning, and it is done through the help of tropes which change meaning, turn meaning, like such tropes or such figures of speech like pun or a metaphor, where the meaning is replaced with some other word. So this is the relationship of foregrounding with deviation, tropes, and figures of speech, which may be either figures of semantic irregularity or figures of repetition. Just for the recap of the yesterday's lecture, let us have a look at what we studied yesterday, that we tried to analyze or understand what schemes and tropes are, where has the word schemes been derived, as the word scheme has been derived from the Greek word schema, which means form or shape. So any such devices which create regularity on the basis of the repetition of the sound or word are referred to as foregroundings in terms of schemes. So schemes are the foregrounded repetitions of expression, and tropes are the foregrounded irregularities. These are both opposite of each other. Scheme, the word has been derived from the Greek word schema, which means form or shape, and here the word scheme is applied to the form and shape of the text, the literary piece or the writing. Schemes roughly have included such figures like alliteration, anaphora, chiasmus, and they have been described as abnormal or unusual arrangements of words and sounds leading to the forceful and harmonious presentation of ideas. Now the idea is something that becomes more forceful because of the repetition, because of the reiteration, and then it becomes harmonious too, because if certain devices like alliteration, assonance, consonance, sibilance, or certain repetition of words occur within the text, they make the text sound more rhythmic and harmonious. Schemes may also be identified as phonological, formal, grammatical, or lexical patterns. So they operate on these three levels. Either they operate on the phonological level, that is sound; they operate on grammatical level, that is the level of the words and structures; and lexical level, that is the very level of the word formation or the combination of words. Now, what are the major types of different repetitions? Because within the heading of schemes, we will look at the verbal repetitions or the repetitions of sounds as well. Now, devices of repetition or the schemes which reveal repetition can be of two types. The first type is the repetition of sound, and the second type is the repetition of words. So when we say that schemes can make use of certain devices which operate at the level of sound, we mean to include alliteration. Alliteration, that is the repetition of the consonant sound at the initial words in closely connected lines or in the closely connected words. Then we also include in the repetition of sounds another device or figure of speech, that is assonance. Now assonance is such a literary device where we find the repetition of the vowel sound or the close connection of vowel sounds that is repeated in the connected words or in the connected lines. And then there is another device known as consonance, that is the repetition of the consonant sound, but not the initial, but the sound that may occur at the middle or the end of the word. Now these are the repetitions which occur at the level of sound. Now another category of the figures of repetition is that of repetition of words. Now here we move a little forward, that from sound we move into words. Here the whole word within a sentence or a clause would be what would be repeated in the next sentence or a clause. And there are many types or forms of achieving verbal repetition or the repetition of words. From among them, the first one is most simplest, that is anaphora. Anaphora is simply the repetition that occurs in the beginning of any line. As a device, we look at anaphora as the repetition of the first word that may be the very same in the consecutive lines. And then is epanellapsis. In epanellapsis, the sentence would begin with the same word and would end with the same word, and it can go on in the consecutive lines or phrases, clauses, or sentences. Then we have epistrophe. Epistrophe means that there would be repetition of the same word, set of words, at the end of closely connected lines or successive lines. Whereas Simplok reveals that the beginning and ending would be the same in closely connected lines or in successive lines. So this is what we did till yesterday. In our last lecture, we had looked at the figures of repetition involving repetition of sounds through alliteration, assonance and consonance. We also studied the repetition of words involving use of anaphora, repetition of the initial first word, and then epanelapsis, that is the repetition of some word, phrase or clause at the beginning and at the ending of the consecutive lines. Then we also looked at epistrophe, that is the repetition of only the ending part or line or word. Then Simplok is repetition which would keep on going in consecutive lines where the beginning and the ending would be the same, that of consecutive and closely connected lines. So this is what we did till the last lecture, where we had studied schemes as devices of repetition, and we divided certain devices on the basis of the function that they perform or the level at which they work. Some operate at the level of sound, some operate at the level of word. Today we'll have a look at what tropes are. What are the different types of tropes, how their categories can be defined, and what are the examples of certain tropes which we will have to have a look at. Tropes, as the word is also Greek word which means change or turn, that is derived from the word tropion. So tropes refer to change and turn in meaning, and it involves changing or modifying the general meaning of a term or an idea or a word. For example, we refer to irony or pun as a trope, because if there is irony upon a word or a sentence, or there is a pun upon a word or a sentence, we see that the literal meaning is different and the intended meaning is different. If I say that you are very smart, here I mean to criticize you rather than praise you. So here I have used the word smart having a sort of irony or a kind of a negative connotation implied within that word. So here it would turn into a trope, because I am making use of a word that has got its meaning amplified or changed. Similarly, a pun upon a word, for example, sun or sun. Now if Hamlet in the play says that he is too much in the sun, he says this to his mother and his stepfather, that he is too much in the sun. He means to say that sun that is shining upon all so bright and making him feel the heat of the sun, and too much in the sun being that he is not only the son of the state or the nation, but also that of his very mother and the father who is dead. So in this case, the word sun, that I am too much in the sun, carries double entendres or has pun upon it. So this is how we see that how a pun or an irony would change the meaning, either modify meaning or enhance the meaning, amplify the meaning, or change the meaning. What it literally means is what is not what it metaphorically would suggest to. So to remember what tropes are, you must remember that tropes involve change in meaning, tropes involve turn in meaning, as schemes involve repetition or balance. Scheme involves recurrence. Tropes are figures of speech that result in a change of meaning. In the study of tropes, we find that the writers feel the need to hide some reality, or the reality or idea is too painful or maybe unbearable. It could not be expressed openly or in simple, usual, straightforward terms. That is why the use of any trope in the form of a metaphor, irony, pun, personification or conceit would help a writer to cover up the more harsh realities, or to present something in an ambiguous way where the reader is free to derive meaning according to its context as well as according to his own sensibility. So if a reader comes across a pun or a conceit, he will be facing the idea of digging the meaning out of the word rather than being presented the meaning of a word simply. So tropes are figures of speech that result in the change of meaning, and it is referred to as an artful deviation from the normal, ordinary, principle or significant way in which words are used normally. So if you normally are not aware of the use of irony, pun, satire, conceit, you'll have difficulty in discerning the meaning of the author, because you will take things literally, whereas tropes transfer the meaning from literal domain to metaphoric or symbolic domain. For example, if a writer says that I am all pine and you are apple orchard. Now this line is taken from Robert Frost's poem Mending Walls, where the speaker in the poem is telling his neighbor that I am all pine and you are apple orchard. Now it's a direct comparison where the persona is comparing himself with I am all pine and you are apple orchards. It means that he is using the metaphor of a tree, for example, pine tree for himself and the apple orchard for the other. Now, if you observe what are the connotations, that make the speaker utter this statement that he has compared himself to a pine tree and his neighbor to an apple tree or the apple orchard. Now, it seems unbelievable, how can a man or a person be pine tree or the other be at the apple orchard? Now, since it is a metaphor, a direct comparison between a man and a tree, now we look at the connotations of the words, the images used. For example, the image of an apple orchard or an apple tree would be that of a fruit tree that has flowers which give fragrance, that has fruit that is eaten, that has wood that cannot be utilized for making any other thing like furniture or any other plank of wood. So apple orchard has the connotations of positivity: spring, fruit, fragrance, flowers. All the positive things are associated with it. Whereas if the speaker has compared himself to the orchard and his neighbor with the pine tree, we observe that what are the differences between an apple orchard and the pine tree? Pine tree is taller, more heavier. Its wood is also consumed for making furniture or other things. It's more darker, it's more stiff, and it's more heavy and huge, and it's more erect and straight, and it does not really give flowers or fruit. So when you compare these things, you find that maybe the speaker is calling his neighbor to be rigid, old, traditional, stiff, and stubborn like a pine tree, and comparing himself to, for example, the apple tree that is more flexible, that is more shorter, that is more useful as it gives fruits too. So such is the force of metaphors, where we cannot really disturb somebody or annoy somebody calling him something directly. So he could not say to the neighbor that the neighbor is too rigid, too old, or too traditional. That would have seemed quite critical, which would have called for the neighbor's or the man's anger or his reactions, which would not have been bearable. So calling him a sort of with the comparison like that of a tree that is fruitless or that is more harsh and hard compensates for what he had initially had the plan to say. So any deviation from the norm, that is the use of a metaphor or a comparison, is referred to as a trope. And tropes are the terms which alter the literal sense of the word. So the literal sense of the word is that apple orchard is a tree. It has nothing to do with the human nature or human personality or human being. Similarly, the pine tree is an entity. It's not a human being. But how pine's rigidity, its being old, stiff, hard and dark, is associated with the stiffness, the harshness, the darkness of ignorance or the old ideas that the speaker is not willing to change or improve. So this is how the tropes alter or change the literal sense of a word and transfer meaning from one domain to another. That is why we include metaphors, similes and puns in the tropes, which change the meaning and which disturb the normal way of communication or pattern of communication. In the rhetorical tradition, tropes are constructed with figures, which are rhetorical devices which affect the order or placing of words. So in the rhetorical tradition, tropes are constructed with figures, which are rhetorical devices. These rhetorical devices change the meaning. Either they amplify or increase the meaning, or they transfer meaning from one domain or one place to another. So that is more complicated a way that figures of speech or devices of literature operate, because when there is a change or turn in meaning, there is complication for comprehension of the text and the image presented with the help of a change or turn. Now let us have a look at various kinds of tropes. Kinds of tropes can be, they can be divided on the basis of the functions they perform and on the basis of which particular nature or type do they belong to. So there can be tropes ranging from semantic inversions to understatement or denial too. So the first kind or first category or group of the tropes can be such tropes which involve semantic inversion. Semantic inversion, that there is change in meaning. Since tropes operate at the level of meaning rather than words, we will firstly observe the tropes which are referred to as semantic inversions. As the word semantic reveals the change in meaning, and inversion is the disorder, the change or the subversion. Similarly, there can be certain types of tropes which are used as a reference to one thing as another. So in which these tropes which are referred to as a type which uses one thing in its place for another, they are changing the place with some other ideas or things. Similarly, there can be word play and puns, like word play in the form of blending of words, and pun is having double or dual meaning. So among the kinds of tropes, there are such tropes which change the meaning or they operate at the semantic level. There can be tropes which may be replaced with one trope or one word, and then apart from a replacement, there can be word play or a single word containing multiple or manifold meanings within it. There can be substitutions or changes. Substitutions, that one thing is replaced with another as a part or as a whole. And also there can be such tropes which function and exaggerate some idea, increase its intensity, and may be labeled as overstatement or hyperbole. Or there can be understatement too. where the meaning is diminished or can be lessened. So these are the various types of tropes, ranging from semantic inversion to wordplay, pun, substitution, inversion, as well as overstatement and understatement. So all the tropes operate at the level of meaning because they change the meaning. The literal meaning is different and the metaphoric or symbolic meaning is different. It can also be that the referential, the connotational, or the social meaning may also be different in the case of the kinds of tropes where there is inversion, change, and there is a deviation in terms of the meaning or its understanding. Tropes are defined as such figures of speech that result in the change of meaning, and tropes are in classical rhetorical canon referred to as artful deviations. Why do we call tropes artful deviation? Because deviation is change, imbalance, disruption, or irregularity. And when such a change, disruption, and irregularity in meaning of words is achieved with the help of certain devices that change either the form, shape, or the meaning of a text, these are referred to as tropes. So tropes are referred to as artful deviation, artistic, aesthetic deviations from the normal standards or methods of communication, and they change the meaning from the straightforward, apparent, and literal sense to the more complicated, metaphoric, and symbolic sense. And it's artful deviation from the ordinary or the prevalent principal significance of any word or ideas. According to the Greek literary canon, tropes is a term that is used for such words, phrases, or devices which alter the literal sense of a word. So in the use of a trope, either it is a pun, irony, metaphor, or a personification, there is sense or the meaning which is altered or replaced with some other sense or meaning. So when there is such alteration or when there is such a change or a turn, we refer to any such device bringing about this change in the text or writing as trope. So such devices like metaphors, similes, personifications, conceits, puns, these are all referred to as tropes. But why are they tropes? Because they are not changing the appearance of a text or the form of a text, but they are changing the meaning of a text, either amplifying the meaning, substituting the meaning, or negating the meaning, or exaggerating the meaning. So that is why if they operate at the level of meaning, either intensifying it or increasing it, these are called the tropes. In the rhetorical tradition, tropes are constructed with figures which are rhetorical devices which affect the order or placing of the words. Now, within the use of the tropes, there is such a practice which changes the place or order of words. So a slight change in the place and word order, the meaning is changed. The idea is changed. Either it is enhanced or it is turned into comic or humorous an idea, or it is turned into satirical mode as well. So rhetorical devices like puns, overstatement, understatement, oxymoron, antithesis, their placement also matters within a grammatical structure or within a particular writing style. So when such a rhetorical device or a figure of speech is used, it also depends upon the order and placement of a word. Now these are the types ranging from semantic inversions to the overstatement and wordplay. Now today, just the way we looked at in the last class, we looked at figures involving repetition that was the repetition of sound as well as of words. Today we have chosen to observe figures involving semantic irregularities. Now this is the second category. The first category belonged to schemes, where there was symmetry, balance, order and repetition. And those schemes operated at the level of sound and word, and it had nothing to do with the meaning or changing the meaning. Now, as far as tropes are involved, they change the meaning. They disturb the meaning, or they enhance the meaning or add the meaning. Figures which involve semantic irregularities, these are referred to as such devices which change the meaning of a text. In literary language, especially in poetry, we observe a unique kind of patterning of language. Unique patterning where the sense of a meaning or a word or idea is transferred from one word or one domain to another. For example, if a writer says that my love is red, red rose. Now, instead of telling the name of the beloved, he's saying my love is the red, red rose. Or instead of saying that how great, grand or superb his love is, he is making use of a metaphor. My love is red, red rose. Now, when we look at the rose, we do not really find the reason that it is taken literally, because the poet is not saying that he loves the red rose. Rather, he is comparing the beloved with the red rose. That is how there is a change in meaning. There is substitution as well. There is irregularity as well, because the poet has replaced the name of the beloved with the red rose. Now, calling beloved red rose or replacing it with a red rose has to be analyzed by the reader. Why does the writer or the poet feel that there is a direct comparison or apt comparison between his beloved and the red rose? Now, we as a reader or analyst would draw the similarities or study the differences of both. If we look at the similarities of the rose and love, we see that rose has got positive qualities. Like love, it is beautiful. For example, its red color, that is more bright, prominent, is what attracts everyone towards it. Then red color, reflective of love and passion too. Then rose has got fragrance. It is something that is given on the occasion of happiness, marriage, love. It is a source of comfort and happiness to people who exchange it. Now, these are the positive traits we associate with rose and hence with love as well, because the poet calls my love is red, red rose. Now, has the writer or the poet considered only the positive aspects of the red rose, that he has used it as a metaphor for love? Now, observe the other side of the picture, where the rose is accompanied by the thorns as well. Rose has got a very short life. It can wither out. Its petals can scatter. It may lose its fragrance too. So it is transient, ephemeral, and it is short-lived. And even the collection of a rose would involve getting yourself hurt through the thorns. And it would last only few days, as the month of spring is what would bring it to life. And then as the spring goes, the red rose would fade out as well. So that is why the red rose is an apt comparison for the love and the beloved for the poet, because neither it is completely positive nor is it completely negative. It has got the ephemeral nature or short-lived kind of existence, and also it has got abundant joy in it, because the little moment that it spends in the hands of a person or in the garden, it gives joys, it gives colors, it gives pleasure to the people who watch it. So this is how a metaphor demands interpretation of the reader. This is how a trope changes meaning or enhances the meaning, because there might be multiple shades and layers within the use of tropes, which would complicate the understanding of the meaning and the understanding of the text for the reader. In literary language, especially poetry, we have a unique kind of patterning of language. We have two types of meaning, general meaning, and one is the literal meaning and the other is the non-literal meaning. The literal meaning is what may not lead us into the depth of the idea. For example, the literal meaning says that my love is red, red rose, that it is the red rose that maybe the writer or the poet loves, but he's saying that his love resembles a red rose which has got thorns, which is difficult to be picked, which is short-lived, which would lose its fragrance in a short passage of time, which would wither out, lose its beauty, physical beauty or apparent beauty. Then it is the most cherished thing, the most bright, dark thing in the world for him to achieve. So literature, as we see the understanding of the tropes and metaphors reveals to us, is highly suggestive and interpretable. So this reason that writing of a literary artist should be suggestive and interpretable makes him depend upon the figures of semantic irregularity, where the straightforward and apparent meanings are not enough if they are discerned from a text. The text would mean something else to those sharp minds who have the understanding of the tropes. So it is up to one's perception that how he perceives the things which are referred to as tropes in the text. When we talk about semantic oddity, it means that there is something rational. So there is semantic oddity in the fact that how can the poet love rose if not a woman or a person? Then calling the love red, red rose makes us understand that the literal meaning is not prominent, rather the metaphoric meaning is more prominent, and it is what applies in this situation or in this instance. There is example for the sake of understanding of the inversion in meaning or the irregularity of meaning, that is semantic irregularity. Water has eaten all kindness. Now, water has been given the quality of a human being. It has been personified to have eaten something. Now, fish can eat, but the water cannot. A beast can eat, but the water cannot. So water has eaten all kindness, has transferred the sense of kindness that has erased or that has gone from the earth or the world with the help of the people who have become callous or greedy. So water has eaten kindness, blood has turned dry or cold. We literally do not mean that somebody's blood has turned dry or cold. We mean to say that they have become cold because they have lost compassion or sensitivity. So this is how literal meaning is transferred to the metaphoric sense or the metaphoric domain. Now that we know that there can be tropes which involve change in meaning, turn in meaning, or shape of the text, where they amplify the meaning, enhance the meaning, or take the meaning from one domain or one situation or place to another. There can be many types of, you can say, tropes which involve the semantic irregularity, that it can be irregularities in terms of meaning, which involve, for example, the first one is referred to as oxymoron. Oxymoron is a literary device or a figure of speech that creates semantic irregularity in a text, and it is that in it there are certain contradictory terms which are combined to make a new statement or give a new sense or meaning. So in oxymoron, a figure of speech which is used to change the meaning, turn the meaning, and it is combined with the other contradictory terms to give another meaning, we call it oxymoron. And oxymoron is useful device to convey the absurdity or oddity of some idea or a thing. So when two odd things or absurd things or things which cannot be matched or which cannot be balanced is to be conveyed, that imbalance, oddity, or a mismatch of an idea is convincingly presented through oxymoron, because oxymoron is the combination of two opposite or very different words which otherwise may not have been accepted as possible to be joined. Observe these examples and you will understand what an oxymoron is. As oxymoron is joining two words of opposite meaning or the contradictory meaning. For example, darkness visible. The very word darkness visible or the phrase darkness visible is combining two opposite things. Darkness cannot be visible. It is where you lose the visibility or sight. So this is how it becomes an oxymoron, because here the writer has combined two words which contrast with each other, and this phrase is used by Milton in his epic poem Paradise Lost, where he talks about the hell. When he describes the hell, he says that there was nothing else which could be seen, but it was only darkness visible. So it is reference to the depth of the darkness, how thick the darkness was, that only that was visible and nothing else could be seen but darkness. Then the phrase echoing silence is again an oxymoron, because silence is the opposite of echo. If something echoes, it cannot be silent. Then the word burning ice. Ice is usually what is frozen, but it is referred to as burning. Then cold fire, fire which has lost its warmth or its flame, that is referred to as cold ice. Then Eliot uses the term living dead. Now living and dead are the two opposite ideas. Those who are living cannot be dead, and those who are dead cannot be living. But here it is used as an oxymoron, living dead. So darkness visible, living dead, echoing silence, burning ice, cold fire, all these words reveal that they are oxymorons. Why are they oxymorons? Because of the fact that they are combining two opposite meaning words, two words which have opposing or contrasting meaning. What is cold cannot be associated with fire. What is burning cannot be associated with ice. What is living cannot be dead, and what is dead cannot be living. Darkness cannot be visible. Darkness is completely erasure of sight or colors. And silence too cannot be echoing. It is just the absence of any sound which is referred to as silence. But as I said, that oxymoron combines two opposite words to make a phrase which convinces us at the deeper level. Now these words appear weird, or the way the word carries the word moron, that they do not sound sane or wise words. But since this is the truth, that at times the presence of too much silence begins to echo in the ears, and it becomes so much a voice, a prominent a voice, that even silence can be piercing for the ears, echoing, and too much, a shout it becomes if it is too long, or reveals the loneliness and agony of a person who is delving too long in the silence. Similarly, living dead is a representation of the people who are away from the morals and the teachings of the Prophet, that they are not alive but dead, being alive. Then darkness visible is a reference to the fact that the writer is trying to intensify the depth of darkness, that apart from darkness there was no sight of anything else. You cannot witness any other thing than darkness when you see in the dungeon or in the hell where Satan and his disciples in Paradise Lost are detained or confined. Oxymoron in the literary texts is referred to as such a rhetorical device or a figure of speech in which an epigrammatic effect is created. Now, what is an epigrammatic effect? The epigrammatic effect is that the statement is very short, hence it is pithy but full of meaning. It is filled with so much meaning that even a statement or many statements cannot convey that. So if a writer chooses to combine two opposing ideas in such a way that they begin to feel like a forceful thought, a thought-provoking idea, this is how we say that it becomes epigrammatic, or it gets the epigrammatic force, the proverbial force. So this is the beauty of any oxymoron, that when it operates at the level of meaning, it combines two words which have opposing meaning, but when they are combined, they convey the depth of the feeling, or they make it a compact proverb sort of a statement. So it is associated with epigrammatic effect, and this effect is created by the conjunction or joining of two incongruous or contradictory terms like burning ice. So in simple words, it is the joining of two opposites or contradictory terms or ideas that conveys a meaning or disrupts or changes a meaning. For example, if we say that two contradictory ideas are combined together in burning ice. Now it is fire that burns, ice doesn't burn, but the cold emotions or the lack of emotions, feelings and sympathy can be deadly like a fire. It can burn the relationships, it can burn the love, it can really destroy or eat up like fire eats up everything that exists. So in the simple terms, it is joining of two opposite or contradictory words to create a term or a phrase, and it condenses the idea. Condenses, it makes the idea compact. Now what could only be explained with the help of long descriptive lines is expressed through oxymoron with the help of just two words that conveys the feeling, like piercing silence, or deafening silence, or echoing silence. This is what is the effect of the force of this epigrammatic or proverbial statement. So it condenses any paradoxical statement or idea, and it often has ironic overtones. Ironic overtones that we really feel that there are dual meanings within an oxymoron. If an oxymoron conveys dual meaning, that fire is something that cannot be cold, fire is hot, it burns, but if fire is referred to as cold, the reference is towards the lack of emotions, the lack of warmth between people, characters or relationships. So in this way there is irony, that fire is what looks that will be destructive, but fire turning cold reveals that it is lacking any strength, any emotion or any power. So that is how it becomes clear that it carries also ironic overtones within it. In oxymoron, we observe many contradictory statements that are also part of literary writing. For example, one literary example is that I have taken from Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, from his play Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1. Here Shakespeare quotes the lines of Romeo, and Romeo states, "Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O heavy lightness, serious vanity?" Now observe these two lines, and within these two lines you find four oxymorons that are used, combined. For example, brawling love, love in a state of fight or in a state of a scuffle. Then loving hate. Now hate cannot be loving, but it is an oxymoron, that hate is a kind of a game or a kind of a war that is turned into a loving hate. And then heavy lightness. Now lightness and heavy are both opposing or opposites. Serious vanity. Now vanity cannot be serious. Vanity is always fake. It is always false. Vanity is always pretension, and pretension cannot be true. But here it is said that serious vanity. Now all these four examples of oxymorons convey a sense of disruption of meaning, amplification of meaning, change of meaning. That is why we say it is semantic irregularity. Now oxymoron is one of the devices through which a writer can create semantic irregularity, where the meaning of a word is not what you normally expect or feel or believe. Here, the meaning is transferred or changed, and there is irregularity in meaning which you associate either with the opposing idea or the context of the work where the idea or the word occurs. Now, the second figure involving semantic irregularity is referred to as paradox. Now, oxymoron is always combination of two words, not more than that. Because in this example, we identified brawling love, loving hate, heavy lightness, serious vanity as 4 examples of oxymoron. Now, oxymoron does not mean a statement or a single word, but 2 words combined but having opposite meaning. What is paradox? Paradox is a statement, a sentence which reveals a thought that is unbelievable, that is incongruous. So, a situation or a statement that seems to contradict itself, but on a closer scrutiny proves true or right, is what a paradox is. For example, if you say ignorance is a blessing, now this is a paradox because we feel that ignorance is a curse. But when here it is said that ignorance is a blessing, we come across a statement that is termed as a paradox because it may seem unbelievable. But on a closer scrutiny, this paradoxical statement would become believable, meaningful and true, because if you analyze it, it means to say that having no knowledge of the world and people, you are at peace. But when you have knowledge, knowledge is whose price you have to pay. So you pay the price of knowledge because then you become more sensitive to understand everything, question everything, ask everything, its nature, its reality. So that is why ignorance is a bliss. Till the time you do not know, you can evade the responsibility. And the moment you get the knowledge and understanding, that knowledge comes a burden or brings it with it so many responsibilities. So that is how this statement becomes a paradoxical statement. And to quote a few lines from a literary work for the example, you can observe this line by John Donne's Holy Sonnet, in which he says that I may rise and stand, overthrow me. So he's asking for a fall. He's asking God to throw him down so that he can stand again. Now, how paradoxical and how unbelievable it is that one wants first to fall down in order to stand up. Now, what he means to say is that if God overthrows him, sends him away from this world to the next, that would be the fall, after which he would rise again and God would make him anew. So, the statement which appeared to be unbelievable initially makes sense at the level of the meaning, at semantic level. That is why we call it a semantic irregularity, where the writer departs from the literal sense of a statement, because the metaphoric sense or the semantic or the sense of the meaning is more profounder and believable than what the text appears to be. Observe this example that is again from John Donne's Holy Sonnet, where he says, take me to you, imprison me, except you enthrall me, never shall I be free. Now, he wants to be imprisoned in order to be free. So if God takes him into his hands and his custody, that would be apparently imprisonment, but rationally it would be the freedom. So he asks God to ravish him, to chastise him. So being ravished by God and being broken by God would in fact be the chastity or the chastisement of his character, that he would be born anew. Now, the third and the last sort of semantic irregularity or the figure of semantic irregularity is antithesis. Antithesis is the most simplest of all these 3 types, from paradox and from oxymoron, because antithesis does not exist either in the 2 words which are contradictory like a paradox, nor does it exist in a fuller statement. But antithesis is the presence of opposite words or the contradictory words in a close proximity within a few lines. For example, in poetry, the example that we looked at in the last few lessons that where it was said that he raised a mortal to the sky, she drew an angel down. Here there is antithesis between the word mortal and angel, sky and down. Similarly, such examples like to err is human, to forgive divine, where human and divine, err and forgive are antithetical. Similarly, this statement like the profit and loss are current under sea. Now, the profit and loss occur not in a close proximity, but there is intervention of some words between them, and that is how they are termed as antithetical, because they are contrasting or opposite. Then the words like living and dying in this line, and the next sky and down, mortal and angel, raise and drew. Now, any idea can be referred to as antithetical, or any word can be referred to as antithesis if they occur in a close proximity within consecutive lines where the opposite or antithetical words are used by the writer. So this is how the semantic irregularities can be achieved with the help of words which are opposing, which may appear to be giving one meaning but connote or carry more profounder or deeper meaning at the level of the syntax, at the level of symbolic interpretation as well as metaphoric interpretation. So today we looked at the semantic irregularities which can be achieved with the help of tropes, and how the disruption of meaning is what would lead to create deviation in the text. So deviations are used with the help of tropes, and the parallelism is created with the help of schemes. So thank you so much.